when you get in these scenarios, you don't really know what scenario you're going to be in. Like, you don't. Like, every day is a little bit different. And so I always say, like, over prepare in training. That way, when you actually get in the real thing, it's not as bad. If you want to increase your performance, you should be doing HIIT. If you want to burn body fat, you should actually be doing LISS. And here's the thing, guys. Most of us eat, I mean, I don't know about you, but I think most of us eat out of like a lot of boredom. I'm sure at some point in your fitness journey, you've been wondering how you can burn the most amount of body fat while keeping or improving your performance, specifically cardio. Now, you might not think, when you say the word performance, I actually don't even think of cardio. To be honest with you, when somebody goes, Coach Stefan, I want to increase my performance, I immediately think power, explosiveness, muscular endurance, agility, mobility. I actually don't really think of cardio, just off the top of my head, being honest with you. And I think most people think that too. They're like, I want to be big, fast, strong. I'm like, okay, bigger, faster, stronger. Does that actually pertain to your career? Now, we work with a wide variety of careers in our everyday hero community, right? Cops, firefighters, border patrol, departments of correction, paramedics, nurses. Now, I'm just going to say that's a pretty wide array, right? We have some people in there that will probably never be in a combat situation. Some people in there that are definitely going to probably be in a combat situation. We have some people in there that have to wear gear and be super hot and put on a pack and have really good cardio. And we have some other people that like probably doesn't really matter that much. I mean, they should be strong enough to move a patient, but will they ever have to be in that scenario? Probably not. So this episode is definitely pertaining a little more towards our performance/tactical athletes. But here's some things. Don't go anywhere if you want to burn body fat, because I'm going to go through the types of cardio and the nutrition of what you should be focusing on. So I'm going to break this episode really into two main things, and then I'm going to tie it in at the end. So first, let's just talk about performance. Next, I'm going to talk about actually what cardio is going to help you burn the body fat. And then at the end, if you're like, but Coach Stefan, I want to do both, I'm going to tie it in so you know exactly how, okay? So if you want to increase your performance, there's a couple different things that you need to focus on. Number one, when I look at people that end up underperforming in the line of duty, a lot of times it has to do with cardio, for sure. Now, I say that because when I was active duty military, I was a PTL. I was a physical training leader. And my job, like part of my job, I was an aircraft mechanic by trade, but part of my job was to help people get in shape and pass their PT test. And it was a push-ups, sit-ups, and run. I know it's not that great. I wish that they did it like the Army combat fitness test, or I wish it was more like the Marines with pull-ups and other things too, but whatever. It was just the basics, okay? And almost every time, I trained males and females, but almost every time, you want to know what the one thing people failed? Just take a guess. Yeah, the freaking run, right? A lot of these guys could do the push-ups and sit-ups, but they couldn't do the run. And we see this a lot, and I'm actually glad that they make you do a run, because here's the thing. In a real life scenario, yes, you need strength. Yes, you need explosiveness. But if you gas out, if your cardio sucks, that's the quickest way to put yourself in danger. Because when your cardio goes down, all your skill goes out the window. When your heart rate gets super high and it takes you 4 minutes for it to kind of drop back down to a baseline level, and you're huffing and puffing, you feel like you're dying and you're dripping the watery spit and feel like you're going to throw up, how are you supposed to freaking perform? And to take you back a little bit in my time, I actually am a wrestler. That's like one of my main athletic backgrounds. I played every sport since I was like a little kid, but I was a wrestler, right? And so when I first got into wrestling, I'm like, oh, this is going to be like every other sport. Little did I know that fight training is the hardest style of training. And I was trying to kind of lift like a bodybuilder and then do wrestling. And it didn't work very well, because guess what? I had all this muscle. It got full of blood. I had no muscular endurance, and my cardio sucked. And unfortunately, nobody taught me about energy systems and how to train and the most effective way to train. But I digress. So a lot of times what I see or what I saw in the military is these people, and they're like, I'm good on everything but just the run. I'm good on everything but just the run. And I'm like, yeah, because your cardio sucks and you don't work your energy systems. And some of these dudes were like, they look good. Like if they go to the pool, they take their shirt off, they're gonna be jacked. These are the guys that you'd be like, damn, that guy's fit. Guess what? He can't run and pass his PT test, or he's like barely on the borderline. And most of the things that we would have to do in the line of duty, and like, it's a little bit different for everybody, but I would say like one of the number one areas where people are going to drop like flies is having bad cardio. Now, muscular endurance definitely plays a role in it, but like I said, some depends on the level, but some people like can kind of white knuckle it a little bit if their muscles are tired. I mean, there is a point of muscular failure, but I'm telling you the cardio portion is way worse. And the benefit of having better cardio is you actually recover from your exercise better. Like if you do strength training, you recover a little bit more. And I could tell you from somebody that I've always looked basically the same the past like 5, 6, 7 years. But I'm going to tell you right now, my performance is way different. You would look at the picture, you'd be like, you're in good shape. I've had times where my cardio is sad. And I had other times where I was like mountain biking, which is basically HIIT training at the max, freaking super high intensity for hours and hours. And my cardio was a freaking tank and bulletproof, to where I didn't do any really like hard cardio for months and months. And I just did bodybuilding, and my physique kind of looked the same because I knew how to balance my nutrition and kind of still look aesthetic. But did I perform the same? Abso-freaking-lutely not. And that's why you, as a tactical athlete, you need to train a little bit different. You can go do the bodybuilding stuff all day long and you're going to look good. That's okay. You're still going to be able to probably be pretty strong, and you might even be decently explosive. And depending on your training split, you might be decently flexible and mobile. Most of the time, no, that's neglected. But you know what you're not going to probably have very, very good is cardio, is endurance. And there's two types. Number one is that high intensity where your heart rate gets super high. I've never been a cop. I've never been a firefighter. So I don't know. I can't say this, but from talking to our clients, from what they've told me, is the adrenaline when you're in those situations is so real that your heart rate gets up even higher, right? So if you're training in your CrossFit gym or your gym and you're training at a 70% or 60% heart rate, but you never go to 80 or 90 and you never stay there, what happens in a real life scenario when you also have a ton of adrenaline freaking pumping, making your heart rate higher? Also, when you get in these scenarios, you don't really know what scenario you're going to be in. Like you don't. Like every day is a little bit different. And so I always say like over prepare in training. That way, when you actually get in the real thing, it's not as bad. Just like when I was in wrestling or I was in the military, I would make sure that I was training higher than what I would actually go into performance, or just at that level to make sure that I was good for everything. I was good for literally any scenario. So here's the number one type of cardio. The number one cardio that you should be doing, and this is for performance specifically, is HIIT training, right? Is high intensity training. Now you might ask yourself, how often do I do it? How many sessions? What type of training? It really depends on your job, but what I want you to think of is one thing, and it's called law of specificity. And that means that whatever you're going to get in the actual scenario, like if you have to drag somebody off the freaking ground because they got shot, if you have to pick somebody up and carry them over your shoulder, whatever you would actually have to do in a scenario, you want to emulate that in the gym as much as possible. Now, it's not all your training, okay? That's not all of it, but it's law of specificity, because here's the thing. If you say, Coach Stefan, I really want my cardio to get better, and you're a cop, and you're like, all I do is the assault bike. Okay, that's good. That's going to get your heart rate really high. That will help your energy systems, and that is great. But are you doing any movements that emulate things you might get into? Which I would say for like law enforcement, just off the top of my head, sprinting, right? You're like, well, I don't sprint, I have bad knees. Okay, that's fine. But can you tell the bad guy that you have, hey, can you wait? I have bad knees? No, you're going to actually have to probably do something, right? So you might not be the best sprinter. You might have a little pain in your knees. But like I said, emulating as close to that as possible is going to be the best, because when you're using your heart rate really high as a cop, it's probably sprinting. Another thing that I would think of, and I'm like a big on watching like YouTubes and stuff and YouTube shorts, I've seen firefights, and guess what? They have to grab their body armor and they have to drag them. So I would think of a sled drag. Every Saturday I go to the gym, and this isn't because I just like this exercise. I do 20 sets of forward pushing and reverse dragging sleds. I think that's a great exercise for law enforcement, because again, what scenario would you have to do? If you were 180 pounds and your partner's 220 and you have to grab them by their vest and drag them 50, 60 yards and your legs are on fire and your heart rate's pumping. And then you have to go try to shoot after that. And one of our tactical coaches, Mike, he's big into shooting and guns, and his brothers actually had a SWAT here in Arizona. He said one of the number one things people don't realize is they'll go to the shooting ranges, they'll go shoot like all the time, and they're fine when their heart rate's okay. But when you actually start to do tactical drills and your heart rate's really high, like your accuracy drops quite a bit. And if you're in law enforcement or anybody that handles a weapon, you know that. So it's like your training needs to be specific to what you're going to do for the most part. Does that mean that you can't put a assault bike in there? Of course you can. But like, are you at least training how you might actually get in that scenario? I know a lot of firefighters end up doing stair stepper with weights. That's actually a very smart thing to do. Why? Because they might have to climb flights of stairs, right? It's a law of specificity. Could a firefighter also go and do rower for cardio? Because I know a lot of them actually have that with their fitness tests. Yes. Could they do the assault bike? Yes. Could they go on a jog? Yes, absolutely. Those things still help your energy systems. They still are helping you with muscular strength, endurance, all those things. Are they specific to the scenario you might get into? Probably not. Now, obviously something like a rower is a full body workout. You're getting, your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings. That's fine. That is great. But again, if you also never do the stairs and you go do the stairs, there's going to be a little bit disconnect. I'm not saying like, oh my God, if you never do the stairs, you're going to completely die. But again, I want to train as close to the real life scenario as possible. So hopefully that makes sense for my tactical athletes. That should be sprinkled in there. If you have injuries, if you have some things that absolutely, you're like, dude, I'm a cop. There's no way I can sprint. I've had, knee surgeries and all these things. That's fine. But then you need to at least train at a very high cardio like you would be sprinting. So if your life depended on it, you could still sprint and your aerobic system, your cardio system could at least keep up, right? That's very, 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 very important. And the reason that I say the high intensity is more important is that's more of the scenario that would put you in more danger, right? Because I hear it all the time. People are like, yeah, I went up this flight of stairs and my heart rate got really high and it was like 4 minutes before it went back down. I'm like, yeah, that's not good, right? When I was at like peak performance cardio, probably back in 2018, I was doing like group fitness and lifting and it was a lot of HIIT training, a lot of high intensity. And I would go and my heart rate would be basically like what I would consider almost the max heart rate. Actually, when I was going to college for exercise science and we did some VO2 max testing, and I wish I would have wrote this down before the podcast, but I had a pretty high VO2 max. Like my heart rate could get up there and like 2 minutes later, it was almost all the way back down. And I felt that you feel good. You're like, I can perform. I can go do this, be back to baseline. Go do this, get back to baseline. Now, right now at the time of recording this, probably not great. It's not terrible. I never let it get, off the hinges, but it's not great. Why? Well, I'll tell you why, because a lot of my training, I sit at a desk, right? I'm an online coach now. A lot of my training has changed. I've went way more aesthetic focused, way more power and strength focused because I don't really need to do that stuff. But if you're a part of that career, it's super important. All right. Now, the second thing is you might say like, all right, well, I get the performance aspect. I should be doing HIIT. If I'm doing HIIT training, high intensity interval training, I should be doing the thing that is closest to the real life scenario, at least some of it, right? Some of my cardio can be other things that I enjoy, which is super important. Because here's the thing too. If you're a firefighter and you're like, I hate the stair stepper, and because you hate it, you're avoidant and you're not consistent with it, I'd rather have you do the mode of cardio that you're more consistent with. But if we could also just make a concession to like sprinkle in your stair stepper, like once every other week or once a week, like that would also be great. Same thing as a law enforcement. If you're like, I hate sleds, they're the worst thing in the world. They're terrible, which they are brutal. I hate them. I'm like, okay, well, maybe find a piece of cardio that you like that works your aerobic system the same. But like, could we at least do sleds on Saturdays? Just once a week, right? And so making that concession with yourself or your coach or your program is I would do that. That would be important. Now, when we go into fat loss, I'm going to argue a little bit differently. I think fat loss is actually different. I think doing more of a zone 2 to 3, like a lower intensity cardio, is a little bit better. And here's why. If you've ever done HIIT training, I say HIIT training. By the way, it's high intensity interval training. So when you say HIIT training, you're saying like high intensity interval training. Okay, I had to put that out there. But when you're doing HIIT training, I'm still gonna say it like that anyways. When you're doing HIIT, basically what happens is it's so high taxing to your body and your nervous system, right? You're going as intense as you can go. So hormonally, it's going to release a lot of hormones to basically get your body to be extremely hungry. Plus you are burning a ton of calories, specifically in the form of glucose and glycogen, AKA carbs, okay? So what happens is your body doesn't care about how you look. By the way, I didn't know if you knew that. Your body does not care how aesthetic you are, buddy. It just cares about how you perform and how you survive. So if you go and you do, let's say, a 45-minute CrossFit class or HIIT, and you are just laying it all on the ground, later that day, there's a good chance that you're going to be starving. Now, the indication you might say is, I burn so many calories. Great, I love it to be starving. That doesn't actually mean you necessarily burn more calories. It just means you have more like ghrelin, and which is a hunger hormone and stuff released in your body, right? Like you are basically just telling your body that it needs more energy because you went through it and it had this like traumatic, I'm doing air quotes, experience where it was like, oh my God, I almost died. This was so high intensity, because it doesn't get what it was doing. It doesn't know if it was in a battle. It doesn't know if it got chased from a bear. It was just like, you were fighting for your life. For you, you're probably in a comfortable air conditioning gym, or maybe you weren't, but you were training. It was probably in a controlled environment. If you're on duty, maybe not. But like if you're in the gym, it was a purposeful, controlled, safe thing. Your body doesn't care. It doesn't know. It just knows, oh my God, my heart rate's pumping. I feel like I'm going to die. And if you've ever done super high intensity, it almost feels like that, right? So what will happen is post-workout, your body releases something called glucocorticoids. If your stress hormone is up a little bit, cortisol levels up, which high intensity interval training does make a higher cortisol. Now, it doesn't mean it's bad necessarily. It's just going to make it a little bit higher temporarily. But that also means you're going to crave other things, sugar, fats, and salts. And I know this because when I used to manage group fitness studios, I personally experienced it, but I'd have a ton of clients come and they're like, man, I just like have these intense sugar cravings. Like I just need like sweets, or I just need salt. And that's literally what it is. And they'd go to these HIIT classes 4 or 5 days a week, high intensity, while they're probably only sleeping 3 or 4 or 5 hours a night, plus they're living on caffeine. And guess what? If you're part of the freaking first responder community, I already know you sleep like crap, right? I already know it because I work with all you guys. And I know that you only sleep like 4 to 7 hours, probably 5 to 6 hours, a lot of you guys, plus you got kids, plus your spouse works, whatever, right? Like I know you guys are not great at sleeping. You live off freaking Monsters and energy drinks and coffee, okay? So that also, okay, lack of sleep, bad for your central nervous system. A lot of caffeine, bad for your central nervous system. High intensity interval stuff, frequent, bad for your nervous system. So now you're having all this stuff that attacks your nervous system, and that's where we start to see adrenal fatigue, injuries, all these other things. Now, I'm not trying to get you and scare you away, because you're probably thinking, Coach Stefan, you literally just told me that I should be doing high intensity training, and it's the most important thing for my career, and now you just told me it's really bad for me. No, hear me out. The real trick is you should be doing both. And I didn't learn this probably until like 5 years ago, because what I would do is I'd do weight training, which is, not really cardio focused, but I'd do kind of like a lot of supersets. And I was like, okay, that's like a cardio. That's kind of like a lower intensity cardio. And then I would go and do HIIT. And all I really had was like pretty high intensity weightlifting, and then high intensity interval training with some weight stuff in there. And so I thought like, oh, I'm balancing it out. But honestly, I wasn't. I had bad hormone readings, a low testosterone. I had adrenal fatigue. I had all these other things because I was just like, go. And I know a lot of you guys are already running off fumes. So here's the thing. If you want to increase your performance, you should be doing HIIT. If you want to burn body fat, you should actually be doing LISS, right? And that stands for low intensity steady state. And that's going to be things like walking, or probably not a jog. It depends on how slow you jog, but like a very slow jog. Things where you could probably keep a conversation with somebody. And the reason that I'm a big fan of that is because it doesn't increase the hunger hormone very much, and it's not going to give you these intense cravings. The leanest I've ever been without feeling like I was going to die is when I just moved all day, which I know is really hard if you're like stuck in an ambulance or a squad car or whatever. But when I was doing in-person training, I had back-to-back sessions, and I was shredded without having to think about it. And I didn't work out in the sessions. I literally just walked around the gym, but I was on my feet walking all day. I was eating just around the same. I wasn't hungry. I didn't even feel like I was in a deficit. I was like, I'm like pretty good. And I just got leaner and leaner and leaner and leaner. And part of the reason is I was doing what I would categorize as LISS, low intensity steady state. I was just moving and moving. And, I would move with intention. I'm a very engaged trainer. And it was so easy for me to stay lean. Then I moved to the online business where I'm working out even more intense. I'm eating even more intuitive and my body fat's higher, right? Because I'm just not moving as much. And by the way, I do more HIIT training now than I did when I was doing in-person training and I was leaner. So that's just me as a case study. Also, I see this all the time. If you just scroll on Instagram or I could reference studies, but if you scroll on Instagram, you'll see some people like, I lost 60 pounds just by walking all the time. Yeah, it's a great method. And the thing too is it's a calories in versus calories out when you're burning body fat. Well, here's the thing. If you're eating 2,000 calories and you do this super intense exercise class, or, you go and do this like HIIT for 45 minutes and you freaking destroy yourself and leave your soul on the floor and you burn 500 to 700 calories, do you think you're going to be hungry and just like not eat the rest of the day? No, you'll feel like lightheaded and you'll feel sick. So what happens is you end up eating back probably more calories or as much as you burn, and then you're in the same spot. And I see this a lot, but you're not just in the same spot. You're also in a worse spot because you're more fatigued, you're more tired, you're more beat up. So here's the trick. It's all about balancing how much LISS and how much HIIT you do, mixed with strength training, okay? So I'll give you an example. When I was at the gym, I was already getting leaner eating like at what I thought was maintenance because my calories didn't change. I just started moving more, just walking, okay? And standing. And what I could have done super easily is I could have also dropped my calories 300 or 400. I would have been like a little bit hungry. And let's say with the movement, there's no way to calculate, by the way, how many calories you burn, even if you have an Apple Watch or Fitbit. It's basically impossible. But let's just say I was in a 400 calorie deficit and I didn't even know just because I was just walking. And guess what? When you're just walking around, your body is not usually like, I'm starving. Like you're moving, so it's not going to give you these hunger signals. And so I could have easily said, you know what? I'm going to go in a purposeful 400 calorie deficit. Like I'm going to eat 400 calories less, which would have put me at an 800 calorie deficit. Then I would have got super shredded, super fast. And guess what? I only would have been a little bit hungry. If I tried to do the same thing with doing HIIT, I would die. And I know because I've tried it. I'm like, I'm going to do a 700 calorie deficit and do these high intensity classes. Every class I felt fatigued. Every class I felt like I was going to freaking pass out. I felt like crap. I was hangry. It was not good. So the second option would be the best option to burn body fat and get shredded and lean, which is just walk a lot, move a lot, be in a calorie deficit. And that would be probably, honestly, that mixed with like 3 to 5 days a week of strength training would be better to get and stay lean than doing HIIT. However, because you're a tactical athlete and because you want to perform and because you should have good cardio, you can't just do that. Because if you just walked all day and then you had to chase somebody or get in a firefight or something, your body's going to freaking underperform really bad because all you do is walk. So what you have to do is you have to do a combo, right? You should be doing a combo. And it's a little bit different for everybody, but I'll give you some insight into where I felt like I was the most well-rounded, where I felt like I could perform really well. I was lean. I felt athletic. Like I was just all around exactly where I wanted to be. And if you guys follow me on Instagram, a lot of people like my profile picture, they're like, man, you're shredded. It was actually around that time. And what I was doing is actually just a perfect combination, what I would consider a perfect combination of structured strength training program. Say that 10 times fast. With a good amount of LISS, purposeful, usually very purposeful movement, and then scheduled high intensity days that were spaced out so my nervous system could recover. and I could still help my cardio. So I'm going to give you just an example. So generally what my day would look like is I would train anywhere from 5 to 6 days a week. Okay. Now during that time, and by the way, before I dive into this, you got to understand that if your goal is to burn body fat, you need to be at a deficit. You need to hit your protein goal no matter what. Okay. So if you're like, well, what should I eat? It's kind of specific to you. I don't know what my macros used to be, but I'll give you guys some general nutrition. So don't worry. What I would do is Mondays and Thursdays, I would do high intensity training. Why would I do them Mondays and Thursdays? I wanted about 72 hours between recovery. So if I did Monday, I would have basically like when I stopped for Monday. So the rest of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or well, okay, we'll just say, yeah, it's like 72 hours in between basically. And then on Thursday, I would have like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, right? So it's not perfect because there's freaking 7 days in the week instead of 8 or some even number. So basically Mondays and Thursdays is when I would do my HIIT. And I tried a lot of different variations. Oh, Mondays and Fridays or Mondays and Saturdays or whatever. And I just found that that was the best thing for me. And it doesn't have to be those days, but just like a 2 or 3 day spread in between, because the whole point of doing HIIT too, or any type of training, is to introduce your body to a new stimulus, right? A little more weight, one more rep, one more set. And the thing is, when you're doing high intensity interval training and you're trying to push your body just a little bit more, how can you do that when your body doesn't have a lot of fuel in the tank or your central nervous system doesn't allow you to, right? So I wanted it to be as recovered as I could, training around 5, sometimes 6 days a week, but usually around 5 days a week. Then on that same day, I would do a very low intensity. So on Mondays and Thursdays, I would kind of do like a body part split, but I would do what I would consider more or less functional bodybuilding because I had a lot of mobility. I had a lot of end range stuff. I basically tried to be very flexible, mobile, and strong. And I would lift at what I would consider a lower intensity. My actual lifts were high intensity, right? Like I would push weight, I would progressive overload, I would try really, really hard. But like I would take 2 to 3 minute rest time, like, you know, strength training, not little 90-second, 45-second rest times and going through it. Like I would slow it down because I already knew that later that day, because I would do my strength training a little bit earlier and then my HIIT later. And I already knew that I had some high intensity stuff a little bit later. Okay. Then basically every day I would make myself go on 2 walks, one in the morning and one in the evening, about 45 minutes. And yes, on the days I did HIIT, I usually ate a little bit more. I was substantially more hungry. I did about like 30 to 40 minutes of HIIT. And then my weight training session was actually only like 30 to 40 minutes as well. I used to do like a whole session. It was too much. And then every other day was just whatever workout I had. So let's say Monday through Friday, I was working out, which I usually wouldn't do that. I would do Monday, Tuesday, rest Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right? Or sometimes I would do Monday, Tuesday, rest Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if I wanted 6 days a week. Okay. So I'd always like lift a couple and then have basically a full day of rest. But on that rest day, I was still active because I would get in my list, my 2 walks, which my central nervous system's still recovering. It wasn't taxing. I make sure I get a lot of sleep. So kind of to reiterate, because I know that's a lot of information, I trained 5, maybe 6 days a week. I would work out a few days and then try to take as much of a complete rest day as I could, especially because I was doing extremely high volume. Now, my strength training days where I didn't really do a lot of jumping around or burpees or high knees or rower or ski erg or assault bike, like I purposefully wasn't doing the intensity, I would focus on basically 2 things. I'd focus on explosiveness. And this is actually Coach Mike, one of our tactical coaches, kind of programmed me to do like a conjugate training. And this would be the closest things where I had 2 days where I was really focused on explosiveness, like speed and explosiveness using bands and chains. And then 2 other days where I would focus on really strength. And so to me, that was the most 360 approach. I had 2 days where I was focused on, and every session had a little bit different for strength training, but 2 days where I'm mostly focusing on my high end cardio, my high intensity interval, you know, balls to the walls, like what can my lungs and my heart keep up with? Then all the other days that I was in the gym, and I know I did some daily doubles with those HIIT days just because there's not enough days in the week. All those other days I focus on 1 or 2 movements And on the high intensity days, I focused a little bit more on speed and explosiveness, since a lot of the high intensity movements I was doing kind of went with that anyways. For example, if I was going to do like banded barbell box squats, which is working on my explosiveness, and then when I do hit later that day, I would be doing high knees. So I got all my like really high intensity, fast, explosive movements in the same day. That way, when I train my brain, it's kind of doing the same patterns, right? Then on the days that I would be in the gym not doing that, it was a little bit slow, controlled strength training. I would still be pushing my central nervous system because I was lifting like anywhere from 3 to 5 rep max. But again, like on the days I had complete rest, I really wasn't doing anything. I just kept my movement. And my calories, I think if I can remember, like I think my calories were like maybe 300 to 400 more than I was doing right now. And here's the thing, guys. Most of us eat, I mean, I don't know about you, but I think most of us eat out of like a lot of boredom. Like I work at home. I know when I was in the military, I would be bored. A lot of our first responders say, yeah, I'm at work and there's nothing to do. And people bring snacks and I kind of, whatever. But here's the thing. Imagine you're on duty, okay? And you're just doing stuff. It doesn't even have to be super crazy high intensity, but you're just like doing stuff all shift. I heard people say, oh, I forgot to eat. Okay. So here's the thing. You're like, I totally forgot. So basically we know that when we're busy too, and we're moving and we're doing things, our mind's not on food. But if you're sitting on the couch or you're sitting on your phone, you're like, that sounds good. And then you go eat, right? Not necessarily because you needed the calories, not necessarily because you were super hungry, just because you didn't have other things entertaining you. So the walking was good because I knew every time I walked, I wasn't eating. Like I'm serious. Every time I walked, not only was I not eating, but I was also burning calories, right? And the walking was also helping my recovery from the strength training and the high intensity, and I guess a little bit of cardio. So I know that's a ton of information, but that was basically my split. 5 days a week, 2 days of HIIT, 5 days of lifts, and 5 days of structured strength training. 2 of those days were more focused on power and explosiveness and speed, and 2 of them were focused on strength. So you might be like, wow, dude, that sounds freaking complicated. Like, how do I even go about that? Well, look, this is why we literally do custom programs for a lot of our clients. And this is why I think generally like the first responder community, specifically tactical athletes, need to train a little bit different, because here's the thing. You might not do what I did. You might not have the same goals, but for me, I want it all. I want it all. I want to be flexible, mobile, explosive, strong, cardio. I just want to be an animal. And there's some areas I have right now at the time of recording this, and I'm like, that's a weakness. I really need to get that better. I really need to focus on that. And this is all while trying to rehab some injuries, because if you're watching this, maybe I just assume you have a couple old injuries or tweaks or bruises, or you're a little beat up. So in order to do that, you can't just sit there and say, I'm going to download this really fit guy's on Instagram, and I'm going to go download his app and I'm going to do it. And he looks like he's in good shape. Fine. But like, what does he do? How does he train? Does he care about those things? Does he just care about the way he looks? Or maybe you do somebody that's more of an athlete. Do they just care about the performance? And here's the thing. We help our clients within my company, like, burn fat, build muscle, increase performance. That's like our biggest tagline that we help people do. Why? Because that's how I train. And that's how a lot of our coaches train. And most people want all 3 of those things. They want to look, maybe not like a bodybuilder, okay? Not like a huge, like roided out bodybuilder, but they want to look aesthetic, but at the same time be able to perform. And it's a sliding scale. Like some people want to perform at the like highest level and be pretty aesthetic. And there's some people that want to look super aesthetic and really good and kind of perform. I mean, I try to be as neutral as possible. I think for most people, they probably care about looks a little more than performance, if I'm just being honest with you, even some of the tactical athletes. But I understand wanting to be able to hold your own. And if this is you, you need to find a good balance of doing everything, because that's literally that's what you want. I mean, think about what you say to yourself in your head when you're talking about your fitness goals. I know that you say those things. You're like, yeah, I want to look good. And, but I also want to like be able to perform. Again, what does performance mean to you? Most people think big, fast, strong, agile, explosive, but then you look at your training and your training is so far off of that. You're like, yeah, I do bench, squat, and deadlift. Yeah, I go in the gym and I randomly wing it. I go in the gym and like I go on some runs sometimes and I walk with my kids in the park and I'm like, that's it? Like you want to be this performance animal and does your training even look like that? And I will say, I'll be the first to say, you can't train everything at once if you want to get really good at one thing, right? I know I'm talking about this like 360 approach and I was training for all of it, but here's the thing too. During that time, I didn't get really good in one area. I want to make that very clear. It's not like my high zone 4 or 5 cardio was really good or my strength was really good. I mean, I looked really good, but even then I didn't look the best I've ever looked because I was training everything at once, right? But here's the thing. Years before that, I trained just bodybuilding to get my physique. And then years before that, I trained mostly just my cardio to get really good cardio. And so I built up the base. And then when I did a program that was a little bit of everything, it was like here. It wasn't here. It was here because I've already built those up. So here's my approach. I don't know where your body is. I don't know if you're like, I have a bad knee or a torn groin or I have this or I have this. Number one, you need to decide like what's the most important thing for you. And I will say that you can do a program where you train everything at once, but you have to understand that it's going to be slower. It's going to be a little bit slower. The aesthetic portion, I'm not too worried about because I would say if you do a program like I did and it's a 360 approach and you had some lifts and you had some HIIT and you had some explosiveness and you had some strength and you had some bodybuilding for aesthetics, and that's basically like our tactical conjugate program, and you had all that together, you could look extremely good if your nutrition's on point. But just also understand that if you were to train just for aesthetics, like just to look good naked, you would probably look better. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's not confusing to you. Same thing is if you were to take out all those like bodybuilding movements that I did and threw in there, and you're like, I don't care what I look like. I don't give a crap. And you just trained more endurance or strength or performance, would you be able to perform better? Absolutely, right? But I understand that most people aren't like so die hard on one way. They kind of want the cake and eat it too, or whatever that phrase is, right? They want it all. And the biggest thing that I've understood is like, it's literally just a balance. My one last recommendation for this would be if you want everything, if you want to burn fat, build muscle, increase your performance, have good cardio, look good. If you want it all, you do need to dedicate a good amount of time to training. So I don't want to go off too much of a tangent, but if you look at CrossFit, okay, and the elite CrossFit people, they're like, oh, they look good. They're animals. CrossFit people are some of the most in shape people in the world. Why? Well, look at the name, CrossFit, cross fitness. What do? High intensity. They do some low intensity. It's mostly high intensity. They do some low rep strength stuff. They do some more, they don't do like bodybuilding, but they do some hypertrophy range stuff. They do some gymnastics. Like it's mixed modal. It's a little bit of everything, right? It's a little bit of everything. It's cross fitness. So the difference between that though, is I think that's very high intensity. Some movements in there really don't make a lot of sense, like snatches and other things. They're just a little more dangerous in my opinion, unless you have extremely good mobility. Plus CrossFit is a sport. So I'm not gonna get too much on a tangent, but like they got a lot of things right. I will say that they got a lot of things right as far as the intensity and mixing the things up, right? You don't go to most CrossFit gyms, and if you're there for 3 months, you're like, wow, every day is different. The workout of the day. Why is there a lot of variety? Why is there a lot of, I'm focusing on getting good at my back squat. I'm focusing on getting good at my muscle up. I'm focusing on getting good at this movement. And then everything that you do as accessory is to get better at that thing. Way different than what traditional bodybuilding would be. And we are doing the same thing too, but it's just movements that make maybe a little more sense, like Zercher squats or box squats or, rounded back deadlifts. Just some different styles of movements. But yeah, you need to dedicate a little more time. Like if you say, Coach Stefan, I really want all those things. I want to be big, fast, strong, mobile, explosive, good cardio. I just want to be a freaking beast. And I'm willing to train 3 days a week. I'm going to say, it's going to be a really slow journey for you. It's going to be a real slow journey for you. 3 days a week for 45 to 60 minutes. You got to put more time than that. Because here's the thing. That will give you just enough time to go and maybe do a little bit of your strength, explosive movements. What about your walks? Are you also going to go on a 30-minute walk in the morning and the evening, or a 45-minute walk at night with your family 4 days a week? Oh, I don't got time for that. Well, you could do it. You know what I mean? Are you also going to do your mobility work? No. So here's the thing. Like, this is only for people that want to be elite. It takes a lot of dedication to training. You have to be super dedicated. Like this last week, I woke up, I did 30 to 45 minutes of some type of like walking or cardio. I actually did a little bit of treadmill, and then I did a little bit of outside. So I'd go incline treadmill with a weighted vest, then walk outside, then incline with the weighted vest and walk outside. So I change it every morning. And then 4 hours, 5 hours later, I also did my lift. And my lift combined all those things. Strength, I mean, on different days, but like strength, mobility, flexibility, hypertrophy, and explosiveness, right? But like, you can't cram freaking 4 or 5 goals into 3 days, right? Or even 5 hours a week. Like, I'll just be honest with you. Like, most of my sessions, I'm at the gym for like an hour to an hour and a half, 5 days a week. That, and again, that's with very smart programming and executing, plus going and doing like my extra walks and my lists and stuff. So if you look at my physique, if you watch any of my performance stuff and you see like, wow, this guy kind of does it all, you know, I train a lot. Now, Coach Mike, our tactical coach, he doesn't train as much, but here's the thing. He's been training for a little bit longer. He's stronger than me for sure. And he's been able to kind of develop this thing where he only has to train 4 to 5 days a week to get almost the same results, relatively, just because he has a lot more base pyramid built up. So you got to kind of decide where you are. If you're listening to this, I'm assuming maybe you're in pretty decent shape. And if you're not and you want that, it's a journey. It takes a while. But it really comes down to how much time you're willing to dedicate. If you're willing to dedicate like 4 to 5 days a week working out, and then also maybe some like extra movement. And here's the thing too. The reason I have to purposefully go on these other walks is because I sit on my butt all day. I work as an online business. Okay. If it were to be like when I was doing personal training, or if you have a job like a nurse and you get 10, 15,000 steps a day, you're probably okay. Probably don't need to go on another walk, which is great because you get to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But if you're like me or some of our other first responders where you have a desk job, yes, you have to get in other things. I think it's really easy. I don't think there's much of an excuse. You just go in, you freaking or get home, tell your family, hey, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, we're going to go on a walk as a family. We're going to talk about our day, put the baby in the stroller and go about it. And we're going to walk for 45 or 50 minutes. Like, that's what I do. Or after dinner, we're going to go on a walk as a family every night after dinner. Like, I mean, there's so many ways to implement it, because I think also the biggest excuse I used to tell myself is, I'm already in the gym for an hour. I don't want to take time away from my family. Well, I didn't do that. I just led my family and said, hey, we're going to go on a walk. I'd love to go on a walk with you guys and talk about your day. And everybody's active and we're being a healthy family. And so there's ways to get it in, guys. I promise you, it does take a little more dedication. You have to be, willing to put in the work. You can't be lazy. But those are the best ways that I have. And I've seen people hit a 360 approach when they're burning body fat, building muscle, and increasing their performance at the same time for high level. Okay. For the people that are already in pretty good shape that want to take it to the next level. If you're just beginning, this episode really doesn't apply to you. It's going to be a way different approach, because you can hit a 360 approach. It's just going to take you much longer, right? Like, it's just going to take you a lot longer to get to that area, because you're only dedicating like half the time or a little more than half the time as somebody that's willing to work out 5 days a week, right? And do these walks and do these workouts. So I love you guys. I appreciate it. My ask for you is that you like, comment, subscribe. This helps me a lot. It helps us grow our YouTube. If you're watching this on any other thing, it helps me a ton. Appreciate it.